live in a community where there's not people who are needy and people who give them things or rescue them. I want to live in a community that has reciprocity, where people don't try to turn away from trauma and loss, that even though it's painful to hear those stories, even though it's painful to think about a world where a child's caregiver, instead of taking care of their basic needs and helping them grow, would abuse them, even though it's terrible to look at those things, that we know that it's more terrible to look away. I don't think that adults as community members understand the importance of their role in protecting children. So when a child discloses abuse to a teacher or a parent or an adult that they trust, that is one of the most important times in someone's life. Because if that adult tells them it's their fault or turns away, they may never share that again. And that closes down their opportunity to heal. Then they're just coping. And that's when we see things like substance abuse, like people thinking they're not worth saving. So I think also when I was homeless, it's interesting how much you get to know people. So if you're panhandling and people won't make eye contact with you, that does erode your humanity, your sense of worth as a human being. And that means that the opposite positive thing is very true as well, that you can make an enormous difference in someone's life by treating them like a human being and by looking in their eyes. Next slide, please. Soon, I swear, I only have 2 more slides. I'm glad you're excited though. I like it when you participate. Okay, so this is a quote about radical hope. Radical Hope is a very good book by Jonathan Lear, which is about surviving colonialism. What happens to a culture when you... What radical hope is going towards the unknown good. So the kids that me and Deneen and Shannon work with, they don't even know what it's like to be safe, or what it's like to belong, or to be loved. And so it's very difficult to go towards something that you don't even know what it is, right? So a lot of kids who run away from abusive homes, they are going to the streets, which is very violent and dangerous as well. And so when you say that they're choosing homelessness, that's what I mean. You have to look at what they're choosing between. So I also wrote an awesome book about radical hope. Just put that out there. And that was about Youth Recovery Coalition, was the agency that we founded to, me and other concerned youth workers, to work with street youth. And we ran that on the peer model. And the reason we ran it on the peer model means that all the staff who worked there, including the practicum students and the board of directors, all had experience with being in the child welfare system, with going to jail, with drug recovery, with being homeless, with being in poverty. And the reason that that helps to heal guilt and shame is because it removes the judgment of who deserves a house and who doesn't. And it also provides role models and hope that people have gotten out of that situation. So a lot of youth workers come from a similar background to the youth they work with, but they're not always comfortable sharing that. And sometimes it's discouraged to share that because people feel more comfortable when there's a distance between the client who's accessing services and the expert who's doling out the services. And similar to the charity model, I think that is a very damaging construct because we are all both clients and experts. And we need to be able to access those different parts of ourselves to make a difference. So part of the reason that I was able to save my life, there were 2 parts of that. First, I had to think I was worth saving, despite all the messages to the contrary that I received constantly through the trauma and abuse that I lived through. And I had one human being who cared whether I lived or died. So this is a story about youth work. So this one young man, He got caught for dealing drugs, and he got an adult drug charge. So he was 19, so this is a serious business. He can never go across the border. There's all kinds of ramifications to that. Things about employment, huge barrier, right? And he said to me and my coworker, he said, "I wish you didn't care about me." I didn't really understand what he was saying at the beginning, because why would that be a bad thing for me to care about him? And this is about accountability. If I didn't care about him, then he could go off and destroy himself. But because I did, he kept going. And that is the biggest protective factor, is having one human being who cares whether you live or die. And that person does not have to be a professional. And sometimes it's easier to be that human being and be genuine when you're not a professional, right? And that's what I wanted to remind you about today. My main message is that we make a difference on that level, human being to human being, when we can see each other, when we can see what we have in common instead of what makes us different. So yes, I do want you to think about that person as you, as your daughter, as connected to you. And I think we have to start in our families, right? And I think radical hope has important implications here, because we are the ones who will envision a better world. I think that we should not be explaining to the next generation why the numbers of homeless kids are so high in our town, right? That doesn't make me proud. That's not something I want to pass on to the next generation. Next slide, please. Oh, can you even see any of the words on there? Okay. Okay, no, I'll tell them to you. So, this is from Youth Recovery Coalition, developed like a moral code. This is the medicine wheel of healing. So this comes from First Nations teachings that we've had about balance in our life. So this is about 4 different areas: mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And we developed this because the street youth have a very strong moral code, because all you have on the street when you've lost everything, when you are connected to nothing, is your integrity. So I think we have a lot to learn from them. I think we should try to be more like them. Because an important part of trauma, yes, everyone who's homeless has lost something. Huge things, compound things. Most people have been hurt in more than one way. But there's also something called post-traumatic growth that happens at the same time as the horrible experience and symptoms of trauma. And post-traumatic growth is the wisdom that you develop when you realize that people are not all bad or all good, that all people have both inside of them. The same as being needy and a rescuer at the same time. And you also develop an appreciation for life. And you also know who your friends are. So there are lots of things that come from trauma, from having the foundations of your life shaken. You develop a stronger foothold as well. And I think that's really important, because we can get bogged down by the trauma and the pain, and that makes us want to turn away. And if we know that there's something good still there, and that it's actually caused by the trauma, and the more traumatized you are, the more growth you have. So we have to support that kind of transformation as well. So a big part of my experience has been turning my trauma into learning and my ability to teach and share with other people, so that we can work on these problems, so that we can look at these issues together. A big part of being a teenager, your main job, is to develop your identity. And we know this is a messy process. We know what this looks like, right? You're trying on different hairstyles and different ways to express yourself, and seeing the power of swear words, you know, all kinds of stuff. And identity is developed in relation to society, right? In the reactions that you get from what you put out there. And so we are part of shaping these young people as well. And I think we owe them a chance to have that positive identity. Because you're right, when you don't have family, it makes you very at risk for being recruited into gangs, being recruited into sexual exploitation, and being hurt. So we have to provide an outlet for that. Many of the homeless youth have never met a senior citizen, let alone had the opportunity to learn from them. There's intergenerational knowledge that needs to be passed on, right? They think potatoes come from Safeway. We need an intervention. So pursuing identity is tied with pursuing your sense of belonging. And that is a very, very basic human need, is the sense of belonging. And I think if you think about your own identity, it all is relational. You're someone's daughter, someone's mother, something of how you give back to your community and what you have to give to your community. So if we just frame street youth as victims, we're kind of cutting off their opportunity to give back to their community as teachers. And I don't think that we should do that. Because they've taught me a lot of things and they get a lot of wisdom from their experiences. So the way that I describe this duality that we have of being both needy and givers, being bad and good, having wisdom and shame, is to call it a veggie burger with bacon, which is very tasty. You should eat one and be one. So what I am asking for today is to be a veggie burger with bacon, which is to see yourself in that homeless youth and to see that homeless youth in you.